Hi, this is Graham from Main Street DBAs. Main Street DBAs is your go-to DBA resource with experts in SQL Server, Oracle, and MySQL, just to name a few. So if you'd like a dedicated, incredibly knowledgeable, and friendly DBA on your team, drop us a line at mainstreetdbas.com. Okay, today we're going to be discussing QueryStore and its basic configuration. So here we have my 2017 test instance, Main Street DBAs. QueryStore does ship with 2016 and newer. So to enable a basic configuration of the QueryStore, you first select the user database you want to enable it for. And here's an important side note. The QueryStore is enabled at the user database level, not the instance level. So if you want to track query and runtime statistics against your database, you have to enable it for every user database you'd like to track. So now we're going to do a basic QueryStore configuration. So first you select the user database you want to enable QueryStore for, right-click, go down to Properties. Property window shows up, and in the left-hand corner you go down to QueryStore. So initially the operation mode is off. This is not what we want. There are three configuration settings. Read-only, which means that captured data can be reviewed. Read-write, which means that historical data can be read, and also new data coming in can be persisted to disk for evaluation and aggregation. This is what we want. So when we're going to click read-write, you're going to see a bunch of default settings populate. Expand this window. Okay, so the first setting, the data flush interval. This is an important setting because what this means is as QueryStore captures information, it's actually persisted in memory until this interval threshold is met, and then it's flushed to disk and persisted, unless there's memory pressure. So this isn't a hard and fast setting. The next is the statistics collection interval. This is the interval by which runtime statistics will be aggregated. So if you require more granularity than the default of 60 minutes, lower this setting. This setting has predefined values ranging from 1 minute to 24 hours. And it's important to note that the lower the granularity, the more data will be captured and persisted in the QueryStore, possibly resulting in the need for a higher max size setting, which is a good segue into the max size setting. This setting predetermines the space allocated for QueryStore data. Now, this might take some trial and error to configure because depending on the workload of your database, you might need a lot more than 100 megs. The next setting is the QueryStore capture mode. So this specifies the capture policy for the QueryStore, and it's got three settings. You have none, all, and auto. And what none means is the QueryStore just stops capturing any new queries. All captures all the queries, and this is the default option. This is typically what you want to see, unless you want to filter out specific types of queries, and that's when you could use auto. So auto filters out infrequent queries and queries with insignificant compile and execution duration. Thresholds for execution count, compile, and runtime duration are internally determined, so you can't change these threshold settings to stop specific queries from being captured. All right, so the next setting, so we're just going to leave that as all. So the next setting is size-based cleanup mode. So this setting directly relates to the max size setting, as the default of auto removes QueryStore data starting with the least expensive and oldest queries when 90% of the size-based limit is reached. Now, remember this max size setting of 100 megs? So when 90 megs in this particular configuration, when 90 megs is reached, this starts to kick on and clear out old data from the QueryStore. So starts at 90% and stops when 80% of the max size is reached. So we're going to leave that as auto. So the next and last configuration is the stale query threshold. So this has a default of 30 days. This is a time-based cleanup policy that controls the retention period of persisted runtime statistics and inactive queries. So in theory, 30 days of query data will be retained. However, if you want to ensure the setting is properly enforced, then allocate enough space to the QueryStore and set the max size limit high enough for your database workload. The more ad hoc queries that hit your database, the more records will be created and the more space QueryStore will need. So those are all the default configurations for when you select read-write operation mode. So You just hit OK. Hit it again. And once you expand the user database, you will now see, let's refresh this. You will now see the option for the QueryStore. Now, these are predefined reports. They're actually interactive reports. They're really cool to use, but that's going to be another post. So that is the basic configuration walkthrough. If you liked it, please come back and check out my other posts about utilizing these default interactive reports in the QueryStore. Take care.